Hello, everybody, and welcome to Kids Grief Matters, going back to school. My name is Danielle. My pronouns are she, her, hers, and this is my colleague, Colleen.
Hello.
So we are going to be presenting on a very pertinent issue tonight. We want everybody to feel really engaged with us. Please feel free to use the chat box, things like that, to ask any questions. Colleen, I can't see the question box, so you'll have to do that just because I'm sharing the PowerPoint. So agenda for this evening. How does Hospice Simcoe support children? What does that look like? COVID intersecting with children's grief. What do children need when grieving? What role does the school play in supporting your child? As a teacher admin, how do you support children in your school who are grieving? Preparing your child for heading back to school. From the desk of Phoebe and her mom, Carrie Lynn, conversations with your child. Making a safety box, an at-home activity, grieving in college, debriefing and being present for your child, and how can you connect with us and with each other? So as you can see, we're jam-packed. We'll try to stay on time. Before we get started, I do think it's really important that we acknowledge the land that we are situated on. So Hospice Simcoe does acknowledge that we are situated on the traditional land of the Anishinaabe people. The Anishinaabe people include the Ojibwe, Ottawa, and Potawatomi nations, collectively known as the Three Fires Confederacy. We are dedicated to honoring Indigenous history and the culture, and we are committed to moving forward with reconciliation for all First Nations, Métis, and Inuit people. So just a little bit about our program for those of you that may or may not know. We are super, super lucky to have started this program a few years ago. Colleen and I, we were granted a bit more space. So Hospice Simcoe, the social work team, and our administrator, office administrator Doris, moved over onto Bell Farm Road. And so on Bell Farm Road, we have more meeting rooms, and we were able to really expand this children's program. So we provide one-on-one bereavement support and anticipatory bereavement support to children and teens. We provide one-to-one information sessions, support sessions with parents via phone, Zoom, or in person on parenting after loss. For example, behavior changes, helping to establish new routines, communication through grief, and helping to identify when you need to get additional help. Family legacy creation before and after death. Teen drop-in groups to resume in the fall. Kids Grief Matters education sessions such as this, and one-to-one parent support. We also have new online video series, which will be having a big launch online soon. So these are on YouTube. So these are accessible kind of little curriculums based programs where there's a book, there's a craft, and there's a little activity and questionnaire. So if you want to work through those with your kiddos. So COVID intersecting with grief. So I put this little story in here. I thought it was really good to just really outline the relevance of this. So recently I was supporting a young person of 9 years old. He lost someone in his immediate family to suicide. He told me that sometimes COVID makes him more sad than the person who died. I asked him what he wanted when COVID was over, and he said this: I want to give high fives without getting in trouble. I want to play with other kids and their toys. I want to play tag and soccer. I want to hug people. I want to go to friends' houses. I want to go to the petting zoo and pet someone else's dog. I think that we can all agree that these are pretty basic things that we probably had as kids. It's nothing extravagant. And truly, these are the ways that he's telling me that he's not been connected in the last almost 2 years. And on top of that, has lost a member of his immediate family to suicide. So, he's unable to connect because of COVID and then because of this death. So really, this is really troublesome for kids. Obviously, we haven't been able to do these things either, but this is really critical for kids. We have other ways of connecting that kids don't sometimes have. So why the last year and a half have been harder? So COVID has been difficult for all of us. We already know the impact, and we know that this has been impactful for our kids. Now add a death loss and many other losses that they have experienced. For example, the loss of structure in their day, feeling of danger, unpredictability, lack of community. So for example, no school activities, sports, hanging out with friends, and little to no schooling for the first little bit, school support and routine. And I put this in bold red letters. Pre-COVID, these were the interventions we used to support our children. This is what Colleen and I would be saying to families is really important, that they have community, that they stay in a routine, that things feel predictable to them. So this was out of our control. This was out of parents' controls. This was out of the school's control. This was out of everybody's control. So we can appreciate as we try to get back into some sort of routine this fall, that it's going to be really difficult for kids. So Colleen's going to talk a little bit about development and grief and what kids need.
All right, thanks, Danielle. So yeah, before we kind of get into the meat and potatoes of what Danielle and I will be presenting about, I thought it'd be good to kind of go over the basic understanding that children have with the death, dying, grief, and bereavement. And just because a lot of times there's a lot of misconceptions surrounding, what grief looks like and what they understand. So this isn't an exhaustive list in any way, shape, or form. And I've broken it down into kind of like school age sectors, if you will. But if after this presentation, you wish to kind of have more information on like a child and youth understanding across the development or across their development, please just let me know. I can post a link at the end of this presentation. So I'll start off with the preschool age. So this can kind of go from 0 to 5 years. At this time, again, like one of those misconceptions is that, children, like really young children, don't understand death and dying. And yes, they don't necessarily understand, the finality of death, why it's happened, that kind of thing. But they do understand that there is something going on in their world, and that the people that care for them are significantly upset. They also have limited vocabulary to kind of articulate how they're feeling or to even label the emotions that they're having. And again, they're aware of the routine disruptions and absence of a person when they die, particularly for little ones. They rely so much on the people in the world to provide them care and to kind of help meet their needs. And if it is somebody like a caregiver or parent who dies, they are very much aware that, life is very different, and that the person who normally kind of gives them this care and this comfort is no longer gone. And it can be really unsettling for little ones. Often at this time, though, they see death as something that is reversible, which is why it's important not to use euphemisms such as, they've gone to sleep or we've lost them, that kind of thing. Because then in their little brains, like they can start thinking like, well, if we lost them, shouldn't we be going out there and looking for them, that kind of thing? Or if they're sleeping, why don't we just go wake them up, that kind of thing. So often at this, for this particular age group, grief can look like developmental regression. So, for little ones who have been potty trained, they may start to wet the bed again or want to go or end up back in diapers. Or even, as they start to kind of build on their language skills, they might regress a little bit. Experiencing separation anxiety can be a really big one. So, every time somebody that they're attached to, leaves the room, they become really anxious or they just don't want to be apart from them. They can become difficult to soothe. So this is in particular, like with babies, yes, they don't understand like the true form of death and dying, but there's that disruption in their world. So, different strategies that you would normally use to soothe the baby, it might not work. They can be extra fussy, but of course that also can extend to other little ones. So toddlers, preschoolers, that kind of thing. And there can also be behavior changes and disturbances. So, they might have more temper tantrums or meltdowns, or if they were once social kids, they might become a little withdrawn, that kind of thing. With the elementary school years, we kind of broke that up to 6 to 10. So here they are starting to grasp that death is a final thing. And as much as they have, very much built on their vocabulary, there still can be some difficulties in, labeling the emotions that they're feeling and vocalizing their emotions in a healthy way. At this age, they can also develop a fear of death because this is the first time they're realizing that, once you're born, life just doesn't go on forever, and that life is very fragile. And it can be very unsettling and very unnerving when you learn this type of thing. And there's also, magical thinking can develop, where they start to think like maybe they did something to cause the death of their person. So, for an example, say, a parent or caregiver is sick with cancer, and then they get into a little fight, or maybe they were misbehaving one day, and then the person dies shortly after. They may start to think that it was something like it was their behavior or something they said that kind of caused the death. So again, grief manifestation for this age group can look a lot like a somatic effect. And what I mean by that is, because they don't necessarily have the language skills to articulate how they're feeling, grief can look a lot like, all of a sudden they're getting a lot of upset stomachs, or they're experiencing a lot of headaches, or even just like tension somewhere in their body, whether it's their shoulders or their knees, things like that. They can also develop some phobias, and exaggerated fears. So this can be anything from, all of a sudden thinking that there's like a monster under their bed or in their closet, or that, if they get sick, they're going to die, that kind of thing. Or if they get sick and have to take medication, that the medication can, kill them, that kind of thing. Again, there can be some developmental regression. So whether that's maybe acting more like younger than they are in terms of their age and development, or, sometimes it can even be that, kids that are drinking from cups all of a sudden will want to drink from bottles or sippy cups, that kind of thing. And there can be rapid mood changes. So, again, like with grief and how we all feel with grief, one minute you can be feeling okay, and the next minute you can be, having a fit of rage or feeling completely sorrowful and just bawling your eyes out. All right. Thank you, Danielle. All right. So the next section is the middle school years, if you will. I know Canada, we don't really have middle school everywhere, but it was a good little section to kind of break off or to identify like the pre and early adolescent years. So at this time, children and youth, or like people in this age bracket, they're beginning to understand what life and death is, and that it is a very final thing, and that death and the grief that kind of comes from it is something that disrupts a lot of aspects of their lives. At this time, like there can be a lot of curiosity about the death, so they may ask a lot of questions, and when you answer them, they may ask them again down the line, and that's okay. That's just them trying to process everything that's happened and kind of just figure it all out, that kind of thing. So again, grief in this age group can look like those somatic symptoms again. So upset stomachs, the headaches, that kind of thing. Social anxiety, so clinginess to their caregivers, or maybe, fear of going out and hanging out with their peers, that kind of thing, or just wanting to stay close to home. There can be behavioral, cognitive, and social disruptions. So again, it can be like, maybe all of a sudden they're having outbursts that they weren't having before, or their attention span is just kind of significantly reduced, or like that grief fog. Or, all of a sudden they're not able to kind of participate in class like they used to, that kind of thing. There can be a lot of self-blame and guilt as well. So again, just to kind of go back on that, like, did I do something, or did I say something that could have caused this? Or I really wish I spent more time, or I didn't say that to my parent as, they were sick, that kind of thing. A lot of times too, grief can come out through play and talk. So you can see a child playing with like their dolls or whatever toys they kind of play with, and they're reenacting events surrounding their person's death. With high school and post-secondary, so the later years of adolescence and young adulthood, if you will. So they very much have an understanding of the concept of life and death and the grief that can come from it afterwards. Grief with these particular individuals, it very much resembles that of an adult, with the caveat that they're also still going through a lot of significant, like, biological, emotional, and mental changes that add to their grief. And again, through here, they can have a lot of questions surrounding the meaning of life, death, traumatic events. So why did this happen? Why did this happen to me? Why do people have to die? That kind of thing. Their grief can, again, it looks like a lot like an adult, but there is some differences. There can be a lot of increased risk taking, if you will. So, we know that in high school, youth are kind of figuring out who they are and trying to establish their autonomy and independence and just that kind of thing. And sometimes that can kind of come to, it can lead them to consuming alcohol or trying out different substances, particularly when they're grieving. That can be something that happens. There can be confusion on the role in the family. So if they're the oldest child and one of their parents died, they can kind of be confused, like, do I need to step up and be a parent of the family, the next parent, or how does this work? There can be a lot of worry of safety of themselves and their others. Like, if this person died, does that mean I'm going to die? Does this mean like my other caregiver is going to die, or my siblings? And that can be very all-consuming when you're worrying about, who's next, if somebody's next, and how you can kind of protect your people. There can be discomfort expressing grief, because grief can be so powerful that sometimes people, like youth, just kind of want to stuff it down, because it can kind of make them feel like they're separate from the rest of their peer group. Or it's also, sometimes, as much as adults like to protect children, they like to protect adults. So they worry that, if they express how they're feeling, that it might upset others in their world. And again, just the behavioral, cognitive, and social disruptions. So it can be, having emotional outbursts that, like, or even just reactions that kind of extend way beyond like what is appropriate, if you will. Thank you, Danielle. And so again, just because we're focusing on going back to school, it's important to kind of identify the role that schools play for children and youth that are grieving. And if you think about it, school is very much like the workplace for children. They kind of get up, do their 9 to 5, like go to school, they learn acquire their education, that kind of thing. And it's a lot of where, like, a lot of their social interactions take place here. And because they spend so much of their time there, it makes sense to just kind of be ready to kind of support them. And they may all, like, people at school, so whether it's staff or their peers, they may also see a side of like that particular person's grief that they don't necessarily, like, people at home don't see. So, staff and peers, they can kind of help identify if there's any red flags or any concerns, they can kind of help identify that. Another thing that schools can do is, they can kind of foster a culture, or they have a culture that can kind of impact a person's grief style and how they process their grief. So, and what I mean by that is, do people feel like safe to express their grief there, or do they feel like they'll be judged and persecuted if they're having a rough day and missing their person? Children and youth may also feel more comfortable disclosing grief to their staff, like to their teachers and like other staff members at the school and their peers. Again, that doesn't mean that they don't feel safe to do so at home, but it goes back to that, as much as adults want to protect kids, kids often want to protect adults. So it's a good thing if they have somebody that they can identify in the school environment that they can talk to. Schools also provide consistency and structure at a time where their life is in upheaval and there's a lot of change. And it can also, schools can kind of act in a way that can help reduce the impact of grief on academics, which I will get into a little bit more in the next slide. And schools can also connect like their staff, or not their staff, pardon me, like their students and their families with resources and information on what grief is, because a lot of people aren't aware of what's available to them. It can feel very isolating. And they can also help coordinate support within the school system with their caregivers. Thank you, Daniel. So some of the practical ways that schools can support children and youth that are bereaved is by facilitating a compassionate environment. And by that is like, if somebody, if they're having a particularly rough time, just being open and being accepting and being understanding of what their experience is at that time. Again, it's providing resources, whether that's, giving an article or a book, or just connecting with a podcast or other organizations that provide grief and bereavement support in the community or within the school. Developing modified work plans with student and the caregiver. And that can look different for everyone, but it can be, you know, making workload accommodations or extended deadlines, or, you know, making sure that there's a safe place where the child or youth can go and have a moment to themselves if they're having a rough day. Sharing information on the grief with students in the class. Now, when a student in the class has experienced a loss, you want to make sure that you connect with their caregiver or the student themselves to see if they're comfortable with you sharing their information, and or if they want to be a part of that process. And through this information, you know, you can kind of help support their peers and how to best support them at this time. Dispelling rumors. So often when people don't have all the pieces of the puzzle, they will kind of create information to fill the gaps, if you will. And yeah, so rumors can get started and a lot of misinformation can be spread. So just being aware of what's kind of being said within the school setting and squashing whatever misinformation is out there. And being available. So if somebody wants to come, if they want to chat with you, just being present with them and being open with them. That being said, we understand that, you know, everybody has lives outside of the school environment. So if you feel that, you know, you aren't equipped, or if you have another appointment, that kind of thing, and don't feel like you can be fully open and available to the person, to the student, just, you know, if you can't do it, that's okay. But maybe help them connect with somebody who they can speak with. And one last thing is just being aware of bullying. We have another Kids Grief Matters on bullying, so I won't touch on that too much, but it's on our YouTube channel if you want to check it out afterwards. And just being aware of any risk-taking behavior or decreasing any sort of diminishment of their well-being, just so you can kind of, you know, approach them, you know, see where they're at and see how you can best support them. All right, thank you, Danielle. Back to you.
All right. Actually, I think this one was yours too, Colleen, there.
Sorry, I was taking a sip of water. Okay, so some of the things to consider as children and youth head back to school is that the child may experience a wide range of emotions and thoughts, because grief is very much like a roller coaster. So how you feel from one minute to the next can be very different. So it's just, you know, good to kind of be mindful that, you know, say there's an emotional outburst in class, that they're not trying to be disruptive necessarily. They're just having, you know, there's just a lot of power behind what they're thinking and feeling, and they need to get it out and kind of help them, direct them to where they can do that safely. There's a lot of uncertainty with the upcoming school year. The past couple of years has not been normal, to say the least. So in addition to their grief, there can be a lot of concerns about what this year will look like, who will be in their class, that will the course content be difficult, that kind of thing, or will they be safe? Which goes to the next point, do they feel safe? Safety is important and it's crucial when going through such upheaval in your life. So you want to kind of you know, if they're not feeling safe, exploring different avenues of what can be done to make them feel safe or to help them feel safe. Restructuring new routines. So, you know, who will take care of them after school, if anyone, if they're young and require that child support, who's going to take them to school, who's going to pick them up, that kind of thing is good to consider. And prior to the lockdown, there were other stressors. So another, one of the things about, you know, being in lockdown and doing virtual learning is that it kind of gave students a little break from those that were bullying them, or if they were experiencing other troubles at school. So, you know, going back, there might be some anxiety around, you know, seeing the person who was bullying them, or, you know, returning to the troubles that they were experiencing beforehand. Personality can very much be another thing to consider. So whether or not they're an introverted type of person or an extroverted type of person, often we kind of focus on the extroverts because they know how to get their point across and they know how to get the attention, that kind of thing. Whereas introverts, they can be more reserved and more difficult to read. So just kind of being aware of, you know, the different personalities and how they kind of, you know, could be expressing their grief through that means. and then the changes in day-to-day, and along with the response towards virtual learning. So was it difficult for them? Is it going to be like good for them going back, or did they kind of enjoy virtual learning and going back is just kind of causing a lot of anxiety? So those are all just a few things to kind of keep in mind for the upcoming school year.
Pauline. Something that came up today actually in a session was that kids are in cohorts now. So if they made a friend last year in class, if they're not in the same class this year, they don't even see each other at recess. So if they've had a personal death loss over the summer, like that's just another thing. Like it just seems like, I speak to kids and I'm like, wow, like another thing. Like I didn't think of that. And so that came up again today, and I'm like, yeah, it's really tough.
No, absolutely. If you want people that understand what you're going through and are there for you, and when you can't, if you can see them across the play yard, but you can't go like see them and actually hang out with them, it just adds all those extra layers to like the grief that people are going through right now.
Definitely, for sure. All right.
Okay, so one thing I wanted to touch on tonight was post-secondary education. Because often, when we talk about children and youth and grief and bereavement, we kind of focus on the little ones and the high school age students, that kind of thing. But the young adults, they're still very much going through a lot, even in post-secondary education. So some of the things that, some of the factors that are kind of, come with attending post-secondary education, and if you're grieving, is that now is the time where, again, like through youth, you were spending so much time establishing your identity and establishing that autonomy and independence. Now with post-secondary education, particularly if they've kind of moved to another town, this is the first time that they're going to be implementing this. And they'll also, for a lot of people, it's the first time that they're away from home. And that can be really difficult. And a lot of people can struggle with this, especially if they have recently lost someone. I apologize. As they may be feeling guilty that they've left their people behind while they're grieving, and there's so much kind of unknowns about what's going like what life is going to look like going forward. There's a lot of additional stress and responsibility. With post-secondary education, there is a significant amount of even more work and even more like homework and things like that and assignments. So in addition to grieving, heading to post-secondary education, they are also grappling with how to, manage their time, manage their finances, just to make sure that rent is paid and that food is, they have food, that kind of thing. And then diet, when you've been living at home for a long time, then all of a sudden you're on your own, it can be a little tricky figuring out how to, have a balanced diet, figuring out culture of community. So, each campus has their own little things that make them unique. So, heading off to a college or university, youth and young adults are trying to figure out, who their clique will be, who their peers will be, what their social life will look like, that kind of thing. And they're adjusting to new living conditions as well. So, when you're, again, living at home, you're used to, the quirks of your family. And then when you go to live in, whether it's student housing or residence, all of a sudden you find yourself living with, people from all genders, from all walks of life, with different morals, different values, different beliefs. And it can be a lot to take in, especially if you're grieving. And often, they're not aware of the resources that are available to them, especially if they're living in a new community and going to school in a new community. All right, next slide, please.
All right. Perfect. So preparing our child for the first day. So first day back, it's a big day. This is kind of our little talk tips. So talk about what the school day is going to look like. Obviously, I've recently heard, again, that schools, at not the fault of any teachers or anything like that, there hasn't been a lot of communication. But with the help of maybe some teachers, or getting in touch with the principal. Perhaps there could be a school tour, especially if there's been a really big life change. You can explain kind of the situation. So try to talk about what the first day of school is going to look like. Maybe we're going to get up in the morning, we're going to have toast and orange juice like we usually do, we're going to take the dog around the block, we're going to come back, and for dinner, we're going to have spaghetti. Even if you're just kind of talking through the pieces that you do know really well, if you have more information, the better. Try to help there to be no surprises. Talk about safe teachers and spaces. So again, if you're able to communicate with the school ahead of time, really designating, maybe there's a guidance office, or maybe there's, maybe it's the vice principal, maybe it's their homeroom teacher, depending on the type of school that your child goes to. Who are the safe teachers that you can talk to? Where is a safe space for you to go? So create a safety plan with the child and practice it. Talk about it. So, if kiddo is starting to feel really overwhelmed, they're really that kind of heightened emotion state, what is, plan A versus plan B, and maybe plan C is going to the office and asking to call home. Maybe, somewhere in there, you're journaling, you're going to your safe teacher. So just really making a safety plan. So especially if you know that kiddo has some heightened emotions and they're really struggling, and they've been struggling and now they're going back to school to this new routine, just really making it as stress-free as possible. Create the plan, practice it. I always recommend, even pre-COVID, when kids return to school after a death loss, to make a plan for when the other kids ask, what happened to your mom? What happened to your brother? What happened? I heard your dad died by suicide. And even worse, there could be a lot of other worse comments. I know Colleen and I could write a book on some of the nasty things that kids have asked. And I think that a piece of it is this lack of education. Kids are scared. They're like, I don't know. I think, his mom killed herself. I don't know. It's weird, but I want to know how it happened. And so kids are really curious. They're naturally curious. So I always have really in-depth conversations with the kiddos I work with to say, how are you going to answer that question? Recently, I was working with some kids and I said, it is completely okay to say, I'm not comfortable answering that, or I don't want to talk about it. And then I teach kids, change the subject, say, I want to talk about something else. Or, hey, did you play soccer this summer? I think, and then also saying to kiddos, if somebody's really pestering you about it, who are you going to tell? What's your next step? If they won't leave you alone about it and you don't want to talk about it. Really, this is helping the child kind of prevent some bullying as well. You're helping the kiddo. There's been lots of really unfortunate incidences where kids are really curious and it turns into an incident of bullying. And so I think just preparing your child to say this, you can say as much or as little within some boundaries. So here's a phrase. My mom died of cancer. I don't want to talk about it. Can we talk about baseball? So just really giving your kiddo some language around that. So we have a special guest tonight. This is Phoebe. So Phoebe prepared a little video for us. We'll tell you a little bit more about Phoebe after we watch the video.
Is it on? Do I talk now? Oh, yeah. Okay. Hello, I'm Phoebe the Sloth, and I'm here to give you some top tips to help kids feel good about school in a couple of weeks. So, top tip from Phoebe, numero one. Get down on their level. Get down on their level and see if they have any questions. That's top tip number 2. Ask questions. For example, my mom, this lady over here, she said to me, Phoebes, she said, what are you looking forward to most about going back to school? And I said, oh, I love to see my friends, and I love to see my teachers, and I love to eat my mango from my lunchbox. And then you know what she said? She said, Phoebe, is there anything that you're worried about going back to school? and I thought, wow, I am a little bit worried in my tummy. Makes my tummy feel funny. Will I have to wear my mask all the time? Will I have to wash my hands all the time like I've been doing for so long? What will it look like when we play at recess or at gym time? Will everybody be there, or will some kids be missing? Lots of questions make me a little bit worried. But my mom asked me, so I got to share them, and I felt a bit better. Top tip number 3 from Phoebe the Sloth. Please let me feel all my feels. You don't have to fix this for me. Going to school, it's my job. But you don't have to make it all sugary and nice. Well, at least you'll get to do this, and at least you can still do that. Let me feel my feels. Let me have a little bit of a sad moment. And then I will get on with it. But make sure that I feel like I have shared my sad, because feeling all the feels makes me move forward with them. It makes me feel like you listened. Last top tip from the Phoebes. That's me, by the way. Last top tip is, please be honest with me. Tell me what's happening. What's changing? Are there things that I can be doing? It's really important that I know, because, us kids, if we don't know something, we'll make it up. And sometimes we make up things that are scarier than they need to be. Right, Mom? That's right, Phoebes. Oh, wait, I know that I said that this was the last one, but I really have a last one right now. Last top tip from Phoebe the Sloth. If anybody says, hey, how come you're wearing your mask all the time, and what are you doing? And here's some advice that you can share with the littles in your life. I have a little brother, and his name is Pip. And Pip is only a baby. So you know what Phoebe does? I say, I'm wearing my mask to keep me safe, but also to keep my baby brother safe. Keeping others safe is a good thing to do for sloths and kids. So those are my top tips from Phoebes. I hope you have enjoyed them. Be safe out there, but remember, we care, and school is a great place. Over now.
Oh, thank you, Phoebe. So a little bit about Phoebe. So Carrie Lynn is Phoebe's mom, who is a bilingual English-Francais teacher, applied theater specialist, and death, dying, and loss educator. She is a PhD candidate at Lakehead University, where her research involves exploring perceptions of dying, death, and loss through an applied theater, and holds a certificate in children's grief and bereavement from Sick Kids Hospital. Carrie Lynn and her puppet Phoebe the Sloth work in pediatric palliative care as community partners at Hospice Georgian Triangle, supporting families and schools regarding myriad forms of loss. She is also the founder and director of Heart Steps, a grief camp serving children and adolescents in Northwestern Ontario. This is a little shout out. So Carrie Lynn and Phoebe are going to be joining us for our next Kids Grief Matters, which will be happening in October. More information to be posted. But Carrie Lynn and Phoebe reached out, and they wanted to have a little bit tonight to be part of our presentation, and we are really excited to have them. So thank you. All right. So comfort kits. So Colleen and I had this idea to make some comfort kits. So the idea behind this really was to have something a bit tangible that you could make with your child um, before they go back to school. So this is something they could keep with them in their backpack. I do.
Hi, my name's Danielle. I work here at Hospice Simcoe. I work at the Community Support Building on Bell Farm Road. This is our kids' room. Here we make lots of fun crafts and we work with kids who have a loved one that is dying or has died. And today we're going to make a comfort kit. So going back to school, really stressful times, kids have been off. This is kind of a little tool to help them feel grounded. This can be also something that you take to, a grandparent's house or to a friend's for the weekend. They can keep it in their backpack, that sort of thing. So the first thing that you need for your comfort kit is just some sort of little case to hold it in. So I got these from the dollar store. They have cute little rainbow ones, or an old pencil case, something like this. It doesn't have to be too big, just something that you can kind of fit some little toys in. So once you have your little bag, I'm going to get you to put something in it that represents your 5 senses. So one thing for every sense. So the first one is something that kind of brings back a good memory. So I have a picture here of a really awesome time when I was traveling. And so maybe your picture is a picture of you and the person you love who died. And maybe it's a picture of you at Canada's Wonderland. Maybe it's you having a really fun time. So something, a good little memory to have. So I'm going to put this picture in my little bag. The second thing is something that you can touch. So something really sensory, something that brings you some sort of comfort. So I have a few things here that I could pick from. So I have my favorite little rabbit puppet, which is very soft. I have a few little toys that someone made for me. And I have these little stress balls, which again, you can get from the dollar store, these little squishy, goobery things. So I'm gonna pick this one and my favorite little rabbit and put it in my case. The next thing is something that you can taste. So I know if kiddos bringing this to school, maybe they're not allowed to have gum and certain items like, chocolates, but you can just get little pre-wrapped candies, again, from the grocery store or wherever, and put those in there. Just something, again, it keeps you grounded, something to taste, something to chew on. Maybe somebody's favorite is Werther's. They could have those in there as well. So I'm just going to put these in my little bag. The next thing is something you can hear. Now this one can be a bit tricky. We used to have iPods, but lots of kids do have phones. So I have my phone here. What I'm gonna do is I'm actually gonna put the headphones in the bag so that I can remember. And I'm gonna make a playlist. So a playlist of songs that make me feel really comforted, they make me feel good, maybe it brings up nice memories, maybe it's my favorite Disney songs, and I'm going to put those on a playlist and keep my headphones in my bag so that I don't forget them. The next thing is something that you can smell. So I know that some environments are scent-free, but sometimes things that bring us comfort is just something that smells like home or smells like our favorite person. So I have a scrunchie here, and these always smell kind of like your person's hair or whatever. So maybe mom died, and you want to have something with you that smells like her. So you could put a little scrunchie in the bag. Alternatively, you could get a little tea light. Maybe your favorite scent is pumpkin, and you want to have that in a little tea light. You could put that in the bag as well. Just a little something to remember your person by. The next thing is so that's our 5 senses. But the next thing is we're going to put a little pack of tissues in there just in case, maybe your little one is, having a good cry. They need to step out, go to the washroom. There's always some tissues. And the last thing we're going to put in our little comfort kit are these little notebooks. So you can get them from anywhere, really. You can go to Walmart, the dollar store, and these little mini pens, which are really cute, comforting. It might be nice maybe for our parent or guardian to write a little note to us and remind us that they love us and that we're cared for. And maybe this is an opportunity if our person brings their bag with them somewhere and they need to write something down. They can write it down, they can write their worries down, their feelings, all that stuff. So these are really easy. You can find them anywhere. Put them in our little comfort kit. So as you can see, it doesn't take a lot to make these little comfort kits. You can be as creative as you want. I do encourage people to put in pictures, to put in things that are their favorite, whatever their favorite is. Maybe they're pictures of a dog. Maybe they want to put in a little book or a note that somebody wrote to them. So these are nice. They can just be kind of folded up, put them in your backpack, take them with you to school, and stay well during the day. And so please connect with Hospice if you have any questions or need help with your comfort kit.
All right. And it's great. So you can grab links to other videos that we have here. So, all right. Just going to stop. So, share for a second. Another way of kind of explaining to children and even honestly adults, it's a good way to help us, is to think of ourselves and our mental health like a bank account. So you can't take out more than you deposit. So this is really good. This might be a good way to explain to even our teens and, our kids going off to college, our older kids. You can never take more out of a bank account than you can put in. Well, you can, but we know what happens. So maybe, again, this is a better activity for our older kids. It's good learning in two ways. So if you think of a bank account like it's kind of half full, you get it, maybe you have $100 in it. And when you're taking something out, your mental health bank account, you're taking out withdrawals is stress, anxiety, grief, breakups, health issues, emotional distress, trauma, transitions, family dynamics. And a huge, huge withdrawal is losing somebody that you love, especially somebody in your immediate family that you see quite often. It's really important that we remember to put in deposits. So deposits are self-care, exercise, movement, socialization, fresh air, meditation, therapy, art, creativity, playing with animals, and sometimes it's time alone. So just another way we can help explain to our little ones to stay well. If you want, you can take a photo of this. Again, we can also provide this PowerPoint afterwards if it's requested. This is the toolkit. So these are some really, really great books and resources. The Invisible String is probably one of Hospice Simcoe's favorites to use. The Invisible Leash is really great if there's been the loss of a pet. I miss you. These are really awesome. So if you want to take a quick picture of this, or again, we can send the PowerPoint off after. All right.
Okay, so earlier I was kind of touching on some of the factors that can affect a young adult as they venture on to post-secondary education. But now I'd kind of like to shift the perspective to talk about how, some of the practical strategies that we can do to support them. So so you want to start off by again, we often assume that people, they know what grief is, or they know how to grieve. And it's not that you should know how to grieve, but people don't know, and they start to question themselves and how they're grieving. So one of the things that you can do to kind of support your youth in post-secondary education is to help them access information and resources. So whether that's, going to student services or, going to a counselor that's on campus and, connecting them with, various pieces of literature or videos that kind of talk about grief, or even just connecting them and helping them become acquainted with some of the organizations that are available in the community that they're going to school in to get some support. Or if there's a group on campus for grieving students, just to give them that information. Another thing to do is kind of come up with a grief strategy. So very much what Danielle was talking about earlier, except with, in post-secondary education, there is just more people. So, it's not as intimate as, say, a elementary school classroom or even a high school classroom. So, your instructors don't necessarily know who you are. So part of the grief strategy is, helping your student connect with the instructors. If they're letting them know about, letting your instructor know about your loss. Pardon me, I stumble on my words sometimes. But yeah, letting the instructor know that, you've experienced a loss and that you're going to be absent. And also exploring with them, what returning to school is going to look like, and acknowledging that, grief takes a toll on everyone. So, discussing maybe extended deadlines or modified workload. If, your loss occurred through exam time, how to kind of reschedule those exams. And also, in some programs, if you miss a certain amount of classes, you fail the class. So, connecting with the instructors is important, because, just so they know that you're not blowing off class, that kind of thing. And again, creating a little comfort kit that, like the video, but, you can tweak it like post-secondary style, if you will. And then, yeah, just kind of helping them realize like that there are people out there, even if they are away from home, and just to kind of identify different different coping strategies, different grounding techniques, and safe places they can go if things are getting a little tough for them. Another thing is scheduling regular check-ins. So what that looks like will be different for everybody. For some, maybe it looks like, sending a quick text to whoever every day, or maybe scheduling, once a week, scheduling a Zoom call just to do a check-in. It doesn't always have to be, focused on grief, but just to kind of maintain that sense of connection and to let them know that, they're not alone while they're off at school and grieving. Helping students to prioritize safety, health, and wellness is a big one. So, and as I mentioned earlier, with youth and young adults, sometimes they do kind of, as they figure themselves out, they will experiment with different substances. And post-secondary education is no different, or in that life. So, if they're off campus, they may be, venture off to different gatherings, if you will. And just to make sure, that they have, let them know that, especially while vulnerable due to grief, you want to make sure that you're with safe people and that you're not kind of consuming too many substances, that kind of thing, because it can lead to not so favorable outcomes. You want to make sure that they are taking care of their health and wellness, so that they're actually eating. What they're eating is, there's some balance to it. So there is some healthy foods in there and it's not just boxes of Kraft dinner. They're taking time for themselves, that kind of thing. And another thing to help is, you can help the student or your child with, is to help set realistic expectations and boundaries. So there's this often, like there's a culture in college and, university that you just kind of push yourself and work to get things done. But help remind them that, they are going through something significant and that they are going to be impacted. So it's okay to, if they're not functioning how they were before their loss occurred, and just to help them be okay with that. And also to set some boundaries. So, if they need to take some time off from class, that's okay. But, you want to kind of set some parameters about what returning will look like. Or if they need some time for themselves and their peers would like for them to kind of go out and do something, that it's okay to say no and take time for you, but it's also okay to go out and enjoy yourself, that kind of thing. And one of the last strategies is to support, don't advise. So, it's, as their children, we want what's best for them. So sometimes we can get into the habit of telling them what to do, but they are young adults now, and they often know themselves what they need at that time. So just support them and try to avoid as best as possible telling them what to do, unless they, explicitly ask for some advice, because otherwise it can kind of shut down communication, and they may just kind of, refrain from sharing in their grief or what's going on in their world, that kind of thing. Okay, so another thing I'd like to discuss today is, we've kind of talked about a lot of what going back to school will look like for those that are those that are grieving. But some of the things that children and youth really need when they're grieving, and to kind of establish safety while grieving, is that information. So provide as much information as is appropriate and that you're comfortable with. So whether that's kind of being open and honest about the death of their person, how it happened, that kind of thing, what going back to school will look like. Because again, as we've kind of touched on throughout the presentation, when children and youth don't have all the pieces, like and all the information, they can kind of, and even Phoebe, sorry, people can start to, like, children and youth will start to, have their own thoughts and to kind of fill in the gaps. And sometimes those thoughts are, worse than what actually has transpired. I know it's not easy having these conversations with children and youth about death and dying. So, take their lead, if you will. And what I mean by that is, if they're coming up to you and they're saying, well, how did my person die? You can say, well, they got sick and their body stopped working, something like that. And then just go off of their questions. Something else that, children and youth can really use while grieving is a lot of reassurance and comfort. So again, like, their world has just been turned upside down by the loss of their person. So just giving them that extra comfort, whether it's extra hugs or, doing something special just with them, and letting them know that no matter what, they still have people in this world that love them and that will care for them. Structure and routine is also pretty crucial. So again, just without like any sort of structure or routine, the world can feel really unsafe. So, just doing your best to kind of maintain the day-to-day rituals that you kind of had beforehand. But also give yourself permission, that what you're going through, you're not always going to have the energy to kind of, maintain those rituals. So give yourself, permission to have those off days, but just do your best to kind of, maintain the day-to-day. Set limits, but allow for flexibility. So, there's so much going on internally and externally when we're grieving, that sometimes, children and youth, they want to do something different, or, they may kind of break the rules, if you will. And within reason, like, it's okay, but you also don't want to allow them to get to a point where they feel they can just kind of do whatever they want. So, set those limits, keep those rules intact, but allow for some flexibility. So, if a youth comes home a little late one night, not that it's okay that they broke curfew, but understand that, like, maybe they're just having a really rough night, or, talk to them about it and see if they were having a rough night and just needed some extra time with their friends. And then, next time, just, can be like, well, let me know, give me a call, give me a text, that kind of thing. Help them identify their support network. So again, grief can feel really isolating. So it's important to help them know, like, who's their person or who their people are in this world, and who can kind of help them through the tough moments as well as the good moments. And help them identify that it's not necessarily just people in, your immediate and extended family or peers at school. It can be people that are, if they're involved in a club, it can be those types of people. Or if you're involved in any sort of religion, it can be at a church, that kind of thing. And just also kind of identify that the quantity, so how many people they have in their support network, isn't important, but you want them to have quality support. So people that will help them, actually help them in a healthy way, that kind of thing. Provide opportunities to discuss feelings, thoughts, and concerns. So, don't be afraid to bring up how you're feeling, or just to ask, just to touch base, see how they're doing. You don't want to force the conversation in any way, shape, or form, but just to, do a regular check-in allows your child and your youth to kind of, feel comfortable in, in recognizing that they can discuss what's going on, if they feel the need to. And modeling healthy grief is also important. So lots of research has shown that, children and youth, they very much, they see how the people in their world, or the adults in their world, are grieving, and they emulate that. So, if you're feeling like, you're in need of extra support, allow yourself to do so. and, allow yourself to have some of that personal time, and that will kind of transcend into the next generation of your children and youth. And giving choices, when we have somebody in our world die and we're grieving, it can feel like we've been kind of robbed of all of our power in life. So, help them, kind of empower them by giving them some choices. So whether that's like, would you like a sandwich for lunch or soup for lunch? Or, do you want to go for a walk now? Do you want to go for a walk later? Just like little things like that, but just to help them, regain some of that sense of empowerment.
So to sum it all up, the best ways that you can help your child is by also getting your own support, reaching out when you're needing help, utilize the people that said they would help. Your community, friends, family, they do want to help. A lot of times you'll hear, let me know if you need anything. Be like, yes, I need something. I need you to help me organize my house, clean out my garage, help me with my kid, taking them to and from school, and give yourself space and time to be sad, feel the feelings, and do this for your child as well. The greatest gift that you can give your children is not protection from change, loss, pain, or stress, but the confidence and tools to cope with all that life has to offer them. I love this quote from Dr. Wendy. So this is our opportunity for questions, comments, any feedback. We would love to hear from you. All right.
So yeah, we've had some comments in the chat box. I'm just saying, love the comfort kit idea. And so don't be shy. If you have any questions or anything, please feel free to throw them our way. Okay, so we have a question there, Danielle. And it is, have you created a bereavement response plan for schools? That is a very good question.
We have talked about that. Right now, I know that the bereavement response in Simcoe County is Season Center. Also, many schools do have a social worker that is contracted. But we've talked, this is something, we see, Colleen and I, we've talked about this in our future, collaborating. So whether we're collaborating with Seasons, collaborating with the social workers that are going in to do a bereavement response plan for potentially a teacher death, another parent death, a child death, it's definitely something that we want to help facilitate for sure. So it's a really good question. Anything else? Well, our contact information is on here, so easy to find us. We would love to connect. Really appreciate. Oh, sorry, Colleen.
All right, we have a couple questions there.
Oh, okay. I was like, okay.
So we were asked, how do you help a teenage brother to share feelings when he is keeping to himself? So that is a really good question. One of the things about youth is it's kind of the first time in their lives where they're starting to venture out of the house. So just because if they're not connecting at home or not expressing themselves at home or sharing doesn't mean they're not sharing. Sometimes they can be, they might be relying on their peers and talking to their peers. But it can be really concerning. So when you feel and you see that your child is hurting and they're not opening up. So again, don't be afraid to, again, try to initiate those conversations. You can't force them, but just to kind of do those check-ins and like, see, how are you doing today? And, or even don't be afraid to bring up certain memories of their loved one and just like, you know what, today I was thinking about your dad and that time we went to the beach and what a great day that was. And, don't be afraid, just like, that was a great day and I'm really missing him today. And how are you feeling about it? Just to kind of, keep it open-ended and allow them to choose whether or not they want to engage, that kind of thing.
I think side by side, quote unquote, play, even if they're a teenager, is really important. Teenagers are funny. They don't want to look you in the eye. So sometimes the best moments can be like in the car, for example, when you're side by side, or going for a walk, those sorts of things. It feels a bit less confrontational. And those might be times to be like, hey, like, is everything okay? Like, how are things going? So that, you're not sitting across the table, the dining room table can feel a bit confrontational at times. Hopefully that helped a little bit.
Mm-hmm. And then we have one more question of how do we get a copy of the presentation? So this event is being recorded. So, after some editing and things like that, it will be posted to Hospice Simcoe's YouTube channel. But if you feel like, some of the information on the slides, you would kind of rather have like a physical copy, just let Danielle or myself know, and we can kind of send you like the resources that we use to kind of create this presentation. And then, we had another one about asking if we will be sending out the slides. So again, this will be posted on YouTube. But if you would like kind of additional information, please feel free to reach out to Danielle or myself, and we can kind of help in any way we can.
All right. Well, thank you, everybody. Thanks for joining us, and we hope to be in touch soon.
Thank you.